Today is Tuesday, June 25th, 2019. This is a regular meeting of the LA Board of Police Commissioners. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Good morning. Please let the record reflect Commissioners Bonner, Figueroa Villa, and Goldsmith are present, and we have a quorum.
Consent agenda items 1A. Commissioners, any questions? Move. So
We have no public comment cards, Sarah.
does somebody want to move a motion to approve the department's report? All in favor? Aye. 2 regular agenda items. A, Executive Director's Report. Mr. Tiefing.
Yes, Commissioners, this is a routine annual adjustment of our fees that the Board of Police Commissioners can adopt, and they're presented to you for your approval, and they will become effective July 1. These are for reports that are processed by the department through the Records and Identification Division.
Commissioners, any questions? Do we have any speaker cards?
We have none.
Motion to approve. All in favor? Aye. Matters adopted. 2B, Department's Report. Chief Chow, is there any commissioner questions, concerns? Okay.
Morning.
Morning. The main question I have really is whether there are any substantive changes to any of the policy or procedures referenced here. I noticed there's an effort for some streamlining and eliminating duplication and bringing in some consistency and conformity. But can you just give a high-level overview of what some of the changes are being made and whether there's any, I missed any substantive elements of it?
Yes, sir, absolutely. This special order does not change the actual pursuit policy of the department, so it doesn't change when a pursuit may be initiated. It doesn't change, the factors that are considered in initiating a pursuit and continuing it and the post-pursuit discipline. What it does do is, and like I said, I'll stay high level for you, it's changing the administrative review and adjudication process to make it more efficient. And it really was changed because with the advent of body-worn video, digital in-car video, all that has to be reviewed, starting with the watch commander and the supervisors all the way through the area commanding officer, the bureaus, and now the pursuit review unit. So the timelines that were implemented many, many years ago were not really realistic in the context of what we have to review now. So just from the administrative review and adjudication piece, the pursuit review face sheet is going to change. The old process, the old form that we had only allowed us to record on the face sheet the results for the primary unit, and that was in policy, no action in policy training or out of policy. If there were additional units that were involved in the pursuit, there was no place on that form to actually record the recommendations. You had to bury that in the narrative, so to find it was a little bit difficult at times. The new proposed special order is going to allow for the documentation of the findings from all the units that are involved in the pursuit, and the findings are changing a little bit. There's going to be a finding for initiation, whether or not it met the criteria for the actual initiation of a pursuit, and that would be, again, all involved units. That could be in policy, no action, in policy training, so it's kind of following, what we do with uses of force right now. And then there's also the classification for the initiation if it's administrative disapproval, which would be an unjustified substantial deviation from our policy. the CO will be able to check the box either for formal training, a notice to correct, or actually a personnel complaint. Then as far as the other units are concerned, the secondary all the way on down to any units that were involved in the pursuit, whether they were requested or not. The old form, as I mentioned, did not give us didn't give us a tool to actually document, with easily what their involvement was as far as the policy was concerned. We will have a section that will allow us to also identify those units on the face sheet and check those boxes. So it'll be for the involvement in the pursuit and pursuit tactics, it'll be administrative approval, no further action or training, or it could be administrative disapproval with formal training, a notice to correct, or a personnel complaint. As far as the area commanding officer responsibilities, in the current process, it indicates that the area commanding officer has 20 days after the pursuit to review it and then push it up to the Bureau. This new policy is going to allow that commanding officer 45 days from the pursuit to review it and forward it up to the Bureau. It's also going to add a requirement that the commanding officer must require or ensure that a debrief is conducted by the supervisor that was evaluating the pursuit within 30 days. That's going to focus on the effectiveness and areas for improvement, and with all the officers that are involved in the pursuit, which, again, we don't have that requirement right now. And then if the area commanding officer identifies any training issues, for example, overdriving or other things that might be readily apparent during his review, he or she will be required to ensure that training, that formal training, is completed within 90 days of the pursuit. Right now, that requirement for the training is all the way at the end after the pursuit review unit sees it, and that could be several months to half a year. So the training requirement in the new order is much more timely. For the Bureau commanding officers, the new order is going to specify that they have to review the vehicle pursuit report, the audio, video, other related reports. The current process is, again, it had to be reviewed and out of the Bureau within 20 days. This new proposed special order will require that the Bureau review everything and forward that up to the Department Traffic Coordinator 90 days after the pursuit. The Department Traffic Coordinator piece is going to be a little bit modified. It was with Emergency Operations Division, but of course the Department Traffic Coordinator now is with Transit Services Bureau. That's specified in the new order. The old process, the Department Traffic Coordinator had to make a final determination within 30 days after receipt of the pursuit. And then, as I mentioned, any training that was identified in that chain somewhere didn't have to happen until 90 days after that pursuit was adjudicated at the Department Traffic Coordinator's level, which could be well on down the road. The new order is going to require that the Department Traffic Coordinator completes the review within 180 days after the pursuit, which is basically 90 days after receipt. If there is a recommendation for administrative disapproval in tactics, an out-of-policy pursuit, or an initiation, that has to be forwarded back to the Operations Bureau with either recommendation for formal training, a notice to correct, or a personnel complaint within 45 days after adjudication. Again, all that is not present in the current policy. There's a little change to the post-pursuit discipline, and this affects the manual section 205-35. That old section indicates that the responsibility for maintaining control and directing activities at the termination of a pursuit rested with the senior officer unless relieved by a supervisor. But other prior paragraphs in the current policy make reference to an incident commander, which could be the primary unit. It should be a supervisor when a supervisor gets on scene, or the watch commander could even declare himself incident commander. So this the senior officer line in there was a little bit inconsistent with, I believe, what the direction was. It really should, all that post-pursuit discipline needs to remain with the incident commander, or I think you could have some command and control, kind of confusion out there. Then finally, this new order will activate what's called the internal process report. It's a form, and any out of policy for initiation or involvement is filled out, and the officer is served with this form within 20 days. So we have documentation that he or she was notified of the recommendations. And then of course, there's a process in there that kind of explains what the officer's appeal rights are if he or she chooses to do that.
And Commissioners, I would add that in overall summary of this is there's about just over 500 pursuit investigations a year, and that process of reviewing those individually, and whether it be at the initial supervisor's level as well as the chain of command and ultimately its final adjudication, the largest aspect of this revision is to marry that process up or more closely align that process with the manner in which we handle non-categorical uses of force, so that everyone in a non-categorical use of force, for instance, if there's 3 officers involved, their actions are each judged independently of one another as to their decision to use force, the tactics employed, the level of force. That's in a non-categorical use of force. This process will allow us to individually identify the role of the passenger officer and the driving officer in the first unit, but each of the units that are involved, and make a judgment as to the consistency of those decisions that they make and the actions they take with our underlying policies. Secondly, as we've looked in the last 5 years with the implementation of body-worn and digital in-car video, the timelines of what is obtainable as far as the timely completion of these reports are the timelines that you have before you. The timelines that you have before you, the current ones, were established about 15 to 17 years ago, prior to body-worn video, prior to digital in-car video, both of which, as one could imagine, are compounding the amount of time administratively it takes for the appropriate adjudication, both by the supervisor as far as its recommendation, watch commander, and each of the progressive lines as the investigation is reviewed. For instance, if a unit if there's a 20-minute, or most pursuits are minutes in duration, 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes, but you could have, but even those that involve 2, 3 units, the conduct of the initiation of pursuit, the conduct of that pursuit, and the involvement of each of the parties is the body-worn video and digital in-car video for each of the individuals has to be reviewed, and so that process we're seeing is causing these more extended timelines. We believe 6 months from date of origin to the final determination of whether a pursuit is in or out of policy, and actions taken with all involved employees, including follow-up training and corrective action when necessary, is much more realistic given the nature of this type of at-risk activity. And pursuit driving is one of our, that's a harm reduction effort. That's one of those areas we look very critically at as far as the conduct of everyone involved. Lastly, and also in our efforts with rank and file and the members of the organization, when an officer is found to be outside of policy and their actions were found to be administratively disapproved, this order aligns the conduct as far as the consequences of that to match what we do currently with use of force. And rather than a complaint investigation being initiated in all instances, which is what the current policy is, that decision now will rest with recommendation by the chain of command and ultimately by the final adjudicator to allow for formal training or a notice to correct or the initiation of a complaint investigation. In looking at the body of work that has existed since the decision to initiate a complaint in all out-of-policy pursuits, we find that the adjudication of those would at times involve non-disciplinary actions such as training and or a notice to correct. So effectively, this is the outcomes will not effectively change because as discipline, that still rests with with the chief and who I delegate this to as far as determining whether or not this amounted to a training incident, a failure, or it should have been more progressive action and disciplinary action to include an official reprimand or suspension. And so this is, again, trying to marry these two highly scrutinized and rightfully so activities of use of force and involving oneself in a pursuit so that the administrative process better match. That also will help us in training and in getting adherence to the standards as we administer these processes.
Thank you both very much. And you mentioned a couple of times training, and so raised the question of what, if any, training is going to be required to get the word out as to how all of the new policy and procedures operate.
You mean as far as if once this process is approved, how we're going to?
Yeah, what I'm wondering is how much of this is just absorbed and by those checking manuals and things on an ongoing basis in the context or in the aftermath of a pursuit, versus any plans or needs to do any more proactive or prophylactic training so that everybody knows what the new adjustments are.
We'll work
as
with
they rise to that level, or
Personnel and Training Bureau and discuss if they, roll call videos or supervisor specific training once the process is approved, so we can train everybody that's affected about the new policies and the timelines.
So, and Commissioner, this will fall within the traditional, relatively routine and ongoing updates and trainings. This will be distributed upon the Commissioner's approval through to each of the Bureau commanding officers at a OO direct report and at a Special Operations direct report to the entities that have pursuit investigations and are charged with the review of them, as well as then those bureaus will then take that and put those to the areas that involve command, supervisors meetings, and this will all flow through there as well as posting online. There'll be an outreach and engagement, again, with each touch point to remind them here are the new protocols and how to follow. There'll be some hiccups, I suspect, out of the washing this through the new process over the next 2 to 3, 4 months, but I don't see the changes being so dramatic as to require a sit down or a stand down, if you will, of hundreds of supervisors in order to accomplish this.
Got it. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Are there any speaker cards?
We have one comment card. We have Mr. Herman.
Sandra Figueroa, Ms. Shane Murphy Goldberg, although Ms. Decker, for the record, is unavailable, nor Mr. Steve Silverov, and last but least, the Inspector General. So, programmatic adjudication of conduct is the main point here. It goes back to Hollenbach, where the officer sitting there at the desk is well aware of those allegations by outside of policy that were unnecessary, right? But you don't want to use your videos. You don't dare use your videos in your car. You don't dare use your videos on your bodies because you don't want facts and proofs to indict your own officers and your so-called policy, practice, and procedure. Justification that has failed, justification of poor training. You failed at it. Well, Sandra failed at it. And why is that? Because aggressive and violent police interactions, such as those described, have led some Angelenos, residents, would to believe that their encounters with the LAPD officers will result in their being subjected to unnecessary force. Unnecessary force. Why do we have these actions still to date?
Thank you, Mr. Herman. Motion to approve the department's report.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Adopted. 2C, department's report relative to grant application. Thank you, Chief Blake.
Thank you.
Chief Blake. Are there any commission questions before they present their report?
Four? Yeah, sure.
Go ahead.
Oh, great. Morning. Morning. Thank you. The questions that I had really are about, one, the $200,000, most of that, if I'm reading correctly, is going to trainer overtime.
Yes, sir.
Is that correct? And so let me just roll out my couple of questions, and then you can take them in whatever order you want. The first question is, how many officers will it train and over what period of time? And is this augmenting existing programs and resources, or is it new? Wondering if this is also, since I've not reviewed this particular one before, is it an annual grant process and reliant on grant funding? And then if you can comment briefly on what the training will consist of, and also who trains the trainers.
So I'll handle the first three, and then I'll
Okay.
give the subject matter experts the train the trainer part. The grant is expected to train approximately 780 students over 13 months. This is a new program. This is something that hasn't been done before. And this is currently it's a one-time grant. I would imagine, given the parameters of success, that hopefully we meet them. This, if it is successful and it does meet our needs, and trains and pushes this out for more than just LAPD. This will be a since it's a post grant, would be statewide and eligible for outside officers to come and see. But at this time, it's a one-time grant.
Excuse me, sir, can you please identify yourself for the record?
Sure. My name is Captain Craig Valenzuela. I'm the Assistant Commanding Officer at Metropolitan Division.
Thank you.
Want to comment on the third?
So I think the only thing that you didn't touch on is what just a general sense of what the training may consist of, and who's training up the trainers.
My name is Steve Hernandez. I'm an assistant squad leader for LAPD SWAT, and I'm also in charge of the crisis negotiation program. One of the things that we are really going to lean on is the crisis negotiation officers. They will be the ones that will be conducting the training because they are the subject matter experts. We've had the opportunity to deal with a lot of crisis on our end, and we'd like to pass that on to the department. That's why we're keeping it specific to crisis negotiators, along with supervision that has also been involved in the crisis negotiation process.
And so the last part of that, I think, was do those crisis negotiating experts, do they require any additional training in order to carry this out, or?
No, we actually, a lot of the training that we do is on a monthly basis. We also work with the psychologists. We volunteer at the D.D. Hirsch Crisis Prevention Center. And a lot of our skills come from those things specifically, along with our training and along with actually just dealing with live incidents. And that's what we're trying to pass on to the department and other officers and other agencies. Some of the experiences that we've had that we've seen that works. And we do offer a 40-hour course, but this is a course that we've cut down to 1 day so we can get some of that information out to patrol, because we're seeing a lot, not only here in LAPD, but nationwide. We're trying to get that across, our message across, so what we've seen that works.
And what is the innovative element to this then?
The innovative element that we see is, number one, the de-escalation portion of it and how we communicate. One of the things that we pride ourselves on is our active listening skills and how we negotiate with people under crisis. Also, one of the things that we deal with on a daily basis with the operations that we go to is just the mere fact of de-escalation, using less lethal options, being able to step back and give us some time, and what we've seen that works. And we want to pass that on to the department so that they understand what we've seen works and give them a little bit of an upper hand when it comes to dealing with either a suicidal subject, someone in crisis, or someone with a mental mental illness.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any speaker cards?
We have two cards. We have Mr. Herman and we have Anuj Romareddy. Romareddy.
De-escalations, hands up, de-escalation, hands up. Since when do officers, SWAT teams become psychologists? Who in the fuck are you? Where in the fuck do you come from, you fools? With de-escalation? Well, it's apparent. It's very apparent. Your inadequate training is proof that you continue to lobby against Los Angeles under the programmatic issues of community members finding out the LAPD is a gang unit that operates to threaten and intimidate and retaliate against any dumb white motherfucker like me who suffers from mental health. Right? The same way you shot that poor man at Costco suffering from mental health. All this training, de-escalation, and we still injure not just one person, we injure 3. Uno, dos, tres, triad. Mommy, daddy, and son. And this is because the LAPD teaches officers to use aggressive tactics. The same tactics you used against Michelle Autry, for the record, when you had her ejected, saying that she was a threat to this meeting. But yet I'm a black cock, and I say what I think I believe is my opinion. Under 42 U.S.C. 1983, fuck
Chairman,
the police.
The speaker's off topic.
So, as you heard, $200,000 for less than 40 hours down to 1 day meets the needs. Well, fuck you. 700 students on that time and factor of monies is inappropriate. And no matter how fucking psychologist you are, you're still fucked up. Theory.
Thank you, Mr. Herman.
Anuj.
Good morning to everybody. My question is, I think stems off of the issue that the gentleman there was speaking about. I guess specifically related to the innovations in peace officer standards and training, are there any plans to create more comprehensive review and data-driven policies around how to review officers' adherence to those standards? And if so, are there any plans to make that data more available to the public and make the procedures used to analyze officer performance available to the public? Feel free to clarify, because that was a dense question.
We can't clarify. Mr. Tiefing?
Yes, Commissioner, there can be clarification because the item is on the agenda. Either Captain Valenzuela or the chief could respond to his comment.
Yeah, sir, I believe you're asking is how are we evaluating the effectiveness of the training? Is that the nature of your question?
I suppose the effectiveness by looking at specific officers and their adherence to standards and the way that you review performance and take action against officers who might not discharge their duties to the best of their ability.
And that's presently being done as you see our review of all officer-involved shootings, as the officer's decisions, his or her tactics during that ordeal and the aftermath. We also look at their training and background as part of that evaluation. And then this entire board, as does the Office of Inspector General, have access to that information. And, of course, the board relies on that information as they make determination of whether the matter is in or out of policy. As a broader matter of just department trends, I would refer you to our annual use of force review report that's posted online. It details all of our efforts in both the development of policies, procedures, protocols, and the application of those, and training, and what the results are. And I think you can find
there's
you can
10,000
find that detail.
If I may, there's 10,000 officers at least in the LAPD, and they interact with people millions of times a year, and we know very little about how those interactions actually play out, the effect that those officers have on the people that they interact with. And as you can see, there's a breakdown in public trust happening. My time is out, but I want to leave the commission with that comment.
Thank you, sir. Is there a motion to approve the department's report?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, adopted. 2D. Are there any commissioner questions, comments?
Not here. No, thank you.
Are there any speaker cards?
We do have two speaker cards and a possible third. I'm not sure if this person wanted to speak on C or comment on general comment. So we have Mr. Herman, Anuj, and Tarek Duray. Did you want to speak on C or general comment? Okay, so two cards. Yeah, okay, so just Mr. Herman.
So this is regarding the report of the budget. $1.5 million. Is that correct? Mr. City Attorney, will you weigh in on that? Is that correct? $1.5 million for a budget.
Revolving training fund budget.
So, because you're afraid of speaking to the mic for the record, can you repeat that for the record, please?
You heard me.
So, as you hear, ladies and gentlemen, the executive office will retain $218,000. As far as the professionals, I don't find anyone here reasonable to be called a professional in the order of the way our tax-paid dollars of the budget are allocated for your provisions of training. Very sophisticated, demeaningful words. But on top it, because the history of the city of Los Angeles and its budget, whether I'm right or wrong, whether the public has an interest to know, is that the stealing must stop. Monies in regards to the budget, the way they're allocated for each program, each service, you do not render. That's why the city continues to be the liability of OIS. That's the reason why people in the public are afraid of the police, except for one asshole, me. Fuck the police.
Thank you, Mr. Herman. Is there a motion to approve the department's report?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Adopted. Report of the Chief of Police.
Good morning, Commissioners. So, as customary, I report initially on significant instances and activities. This past week, I attended the funeral services of Officer Esmery Ramirez, and this was also attended by Commissioner Figueroa Villa. Thank you for your attendance, as well as Ms. Decker and Mr. T-Fank. The mayor was also participating in providing remarks to the family. And we continue to mourn her loss. She represents the 210th officer who've fallen in the line of duty. On Thursday, I attended the Juneteenth celebration hosted by Supervisor Mark Ridley Thomas and enjoyed the evening with hearing a number of speakers and just the opportunity to recognize the opportunity to recognize a celebration of African American diversity and the powerful impact that that community has had within this country, and also to acknowledge the past efforts that have been wrongly headed and the abuses and misuse of authority by the state and by communities. And this was a great opportunity to bring all of Los Angeles together and celebrate the past, recognize some of the failings that's existed and the promise of a brighter future. Last week on Friday, I visited a bridge home site in the Hollywood area, which represents our third location as a city. It's ran by the PATH organization and was at full occupancy. And the tour of the facility saw a very clean and well-organized and ran facility. PATH is one of our best community-based organizations in providing for bridge and supportive housing and services for those experiencing homelessness. And I was impressed by the work that they have done there, and as well as in hearing about the relationship with the officers, both assigned directly to that immediate area, as well as with the Hollywood area in general, as to the problem solving and real supportive nature in which our officers are there. PATH talks to spend some time, senior representatives of that organization, spent some time recognizing that historically they have not welcomed or allowed law enforcement into their facilities as a means of just how disruptive it can be to their clientele, and how this facility has changed their perspective, and as they're growing to understand how that bridge home works and its interplay in the community, they've seen the value of inviting officers in to have a cup of coffee, to share a meal, and interact both with clientele as well as with staff, and that it has been an experience that has helped develop a broader perspective on them as far as the partnership with LAPD and the safety of these facilities, as well as with the clientele. Just returned last night from travel to Washington, D.C., where with our district attorney, Jackie Lacey. The conference therefore is a one-day conference that involved Manhattan District Attorney Cyrus Vance and Commissioner Jimmy O'Neill from the NYPD for a number of major cities, about 8 of us that brought our respective district attorneys and ourselves to sit down and spend the day and talk about the state of criminal justice reform, where our strengths were, some of our challenges, and really the pursuit of working more collaboratively with our district attorneys and law enforcement executives as to reforms identified and paths in which to achieve those reforms that cuts down on misinformation or misunderstandings that can sometimes happen when these two parts of the criminal justice system don't operate in a more cohesive fashion. I'm proud of our relationship with Ms. Lacey in the district attorney's office. We meet regularly, both her and I, as well as senior members of her organization and this department, in talking about the state of criminal justice matters in this county, and particularly as it impacts LAPD and our LA City. It deals with mental health, juvenile diversion, other issues that I look forward to her continued efforts to strike reform in a manner that improves public safety and outcomes for individuals who are many times stricken with mental health issues or substance abuse, and the criminal justice system, frankly, just is not a good fit for the resolution of their life challenges. Moving to our crime, I want to talk. We continue to see an overall decrease in violent and property crimes. We have 8 fewer homicides this year to date than last, which is a 6% reduction. We have 588 fewer violent crimes overall, which is just over a 4% reduction, and 4,257 fewer Part 1 crimes, which is just under a 7% reduction in Part 1 crime this year versus last. And over a 2-year period, we're tracking at just over a 7% reduction in overall reduction in Part 1 crimes, as well as a reduction in violent crimes. So that trending is good information, and it's good to see as we enter the summer months. However, we're still challenged in one area where we saw an outgrowth in this past March in the number of victims shot compared to the same period last year. We are basically holding even right now. We're plus 54 additional shooting victims this year versus last. And as you reflect, if you look back the last 60 to 90 days, that number of that additional number of victims is basically held at that number. It's fluctuated from 48 to 59, 60. So we're basically tracking this year versus last at the same, primarily the same level of types of violent crimes that we saw last year, with the exception of that one 4 to 6 week period of time. Gang violence is gang-related crime. It continues to be the heavy influencer in that. We have a 5.2% increase in gang crime. That's 95 additional gang-related crimes. And our victim shot is 8.3% increase in gang-related shootings. Regarding officer-involved shootings, this past week we had no officer-involved shootings, which leads us to a total of 13 officer-involved shootings this year to date versus 17 last year, and verse 21 as a 4-year average. So we are at a 23.5% reduction, 4 fewer officer-involved shootings this year versus last. We have had 5 officer-involved shootings resulting in a fatality. Last year, that number was 9, which is a 44% reduction. Moving over to our traffic, we have suffered 107 fatal traffic collisions this year versus 111 last year. So we are 4 fewer fatal traffic collisions. The challenges we have, while we've seen a reduction in bicyclist-involved fatal collisions, we've seen an increase in motor vehicle versus ped collisions, resulting in a fatality. 58 people have lost their lives this year in a motor vehicle versus pedestrian collision. That number was 53 a year ago, and if you go back 4 years ago, that number was 38. So pedestrian collisions involving motor vehicles continues to be a significant challenge for us. And while I'm encouraged by our enforcement efforts, both with particularly on speed violators that can impact pedestrians on roadways, as well as distracted driving, the outreach and awareness to our pedestrian population, people who walk our streets and sidewalks, is to exercise good defensive measures, because there is the pressure here, I believe, is as more and more Angelenos go and walk on foot rather than travel in vehicles. The motoring public is not always exercising the level of restraint and good driving practices that they should. And while enforcement has a key there, as does engineering factors, so is education. We still see a lot of, just in the downtown area and other areas such as Hollywood and Venice, I see a lot of distracted walking as well, with people busily on their phones and devices rather than paying attention to their surroundings. Lastly, moving over to our personnel, we have 10,005 sworn personnel on payroll. We have 2,969 civilian personnel on payroll, 389 reserve officers, and 1,484 cadets. And I'm happy to answer any questions or take any comments.
Commissioners, do you have any questions? Go ahead.
Thank you, Chief. You mentioned some of the discussions you had in Washington with the district attorney. Can you share with us just some of the highlights with regard to the state of criminal justice reform and some of the strengths and weaknesses that you referred to?
Yeah, so 2 areas of particular concern was we see this and reflected this from the West Coast and to parties across the country, is criminal justice reform has moved in the last 8 to 10 years to bring offenders away from incarceration, away from long-term sentencing, and provide more of an opportunity for community supervision and supportive services. And while that's something that we continue to advocate and support for, that the application of that has not resulted as frequently in added mental health services and supportive services such as housing and jobs. And so while we see and support reform, that reform needs to follow through, and that the advocacy of those services by prosecutors as well as law enforcement professionals, we believe, will help hold accountable elected officials and others that are committed to these types of reforms. The other matter is that there are instances in which the exercise of discretion is argued as to a prosecutor's decision to exercise discretion on what he or she will prosecute as an offense. And the disagreement with local law enforcement professionals is whether or not that decision is the quote-unquote right decision. And what was important yesterday for us to convey is that discretion across the criminal justice system exists at every level. From the point of which a person calls 911, we begin a process of discretion. 1 out of 3 calls to 911 actually result in a dispatch of a police unit, because 2 of the other 3 instances don't amount to something that the police should investigate or respond to. That's discretion. When an officer arrives on scene, he or she's actions exercise discretion as to advice, warning, persuasion, an offense such as an arrest or citation. So it goes with the prosecutor. As the prosecutor receives our screening of the process that results in an arrest of an individual or an offender, whether or not they file that case, they exercise discretion based on what they believe is the interest of justice and public safety. The court system then does a similar process. So what we talked yesterday about was, rather than looking at that as an adversarial matter where we throw sound bites in public settings about what the district attorney's office should be doing or what the police department should be doing, is that we take a more mature look at this and have a step back and reflect that that discretion exists along, and we should talk about the impact of how we apply that discretion as colleagues, and recognizing that we have much more in common, and that those lines of communication, as they open and improve, that helps, I think, the public understand and have faith in the criminal justice system. Lastly, that there'll be instances and parties that make statements that represent themselves as perhaps labor, rank and file of an organization, that may be have no or little alignment with the management or leadership of an organization. And so a group or a rank and file labor organizations, that role is understood as a bargaining unit, and that even their representation or the belief of their rank and file supportive of those statements is not always consistent either. So these are all conversations that I think improve relationships as they're talked about and spoken about candidly in closed sessions rather than in the media in front of a microphone. So I found it was helpful. I believe, again, District Attorney Lacey and myself and members of the LA County region who meet regularly as part of our criminal justice quarterly meetings and ongoing discussions get it right much more than what I saw yesterday, which I saw some instances of people that really were a little more apart. I had a wider gap between their respective positions that I think helping sitting down and having conversations can break down some of those barriers.
If you can, just on 2 points. One, you mentioned one of the areas of concern was the need for more mental health, housing, and jobs resources. So is this just a conversation? Like, I'm trying to paint the picture in the room. Is it a conversation where that need is highlighted, noted, and it's taken back to discussions like this? Or is there any organized effort to actually then advocate for those resources?
So the latter part of the conversation yesterday was what would come from this meeting. Would there be a statement, a public statement by representing the group? And that was kicked around, and I believe is still in conversation about occurring. A follow-up meeting 6 months from now as to take another opportunity to sit down and talk about what's happened in the last 6 months, talk about what came from this meeting. And then also, to your point though, going back and advocating prosecutors as well as police law enforcement executives on a more common agenda to promote, again, awareness and advocacy for things that aspects of how criminal justice reform has rolled out, and where has it had its points of significant strength, and where have been areas that have been gaps or challenging, and again, for us to strategically work together and rather than autonomously.
And in a similar vein, you mentioned the need to take a step back and look at how discretion in various areas is being authorized. How is that step back being taken? I mean, in other words, where does that conversation go? So you had a good conversation about the need to take a step back and look at it. But what does that mean?
Well, it was one of the more spirited aspects of the meeting because as people exercise discretion from a prosecutor's standpoint, they may believe that this is particularly in areas where they would not file or did not pursue criminal charges where the law enforcement executive believed there should be. This dealt with the sale and distribution of narcotics, and for instance, what was an area of particular discussion, and what came from that was misperceptions because of published accounts and really a lack of understanding, where prosecutors would announce that, for instance, they would not prosecute marijuana offenses blanketly, and the misperception of that was that a person who was in the sale and distribution of marijuana on a street corner or on a mid-level, that district attorney would not take criminal charges and file those criminal charges and pursue criminal prosecutions. And that was not what the circumstances were. What was meant by that was that a minor possession of less than an ounce of cannabis or marijuana on a person was not, they were not going to file or pursue criminal charges against that. So that conversation, again, I found it striking, is that you had to have a conversation. What's striking about this is that there was that type of misperception from regions that really were relatively closely aligned with each other as far as proximity. And so how they misunderstood that spoke to a lack of a certain amount of visibility. So again, the meeting, I think, broke down some of those barriers, made some introductions, and also spoke out to me as a law enforcement professional, just how some of the strategies we have here in this region goes to really understand what people's positions are, who hold significant positions within the criminal justice system, and how those positions are actually going to be applied, and so that we can truly understand whether we have a conflict or if in fact we're both saying the same thing.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any speaker cards?
We have one. We have Mr. Herman.
Missing mayor, de-escalation, and a systemic use of heavy-handed tactics. Holland versus Harrington, 10th Circuit, 2001. Terry Stop under Illinois versus Wardlow, 528 U.S. 119124-25-2000. And as you heard, the chief's report, crime is down. Homeless people are not targeted by over-ticketing, but that's a misleading, unfactual truth. See, I use public transportation daily, and it's unfortunate that we have a homeless crisis where people have to sleep, rest, provide themselves shelter in a safe area of the subway. But the LAPD officers are acting as a terrorist group of individuals who encounter homeless people and give them tickets. Why the fuck are you giving people tickets if you know they don't have a job? You know they can't go back to work. You know they don't have a home. You just came back from fucking Washington and you talked about this and you heard in the discussion, thank you, Mr. Dale Bonner, for bringing up the points. Why do you keep targeting African Americans at the bus stop? Why do you racial profile people like myself who look scrungy and possibly could be a potential threat? But what is a potential threat? There's no fucking such thing as a potential threat. You're acting in the color of authority, violating the civil rights of individuals simply because you continue to racial profile fucking motherfuckers. Fuck you.
We have
Thank
no
you,
other
Ms.
cards on item number 3. We're on item number 4, public comment. We have 6 comment cards. We have Jeffrey Delshad, Mr. Herman, Tarek Duray McFadden Sr.
Good morning. Okay, I see there's 2 missing today. I saw the tweet of Commissioner Bonner riding the metro. I thought that was nice that you guys are getting out there and showing yourselves as the commission, not just the department, and seeing what's going on in the real world, I guess. That was nice hearing about discretion. That is true. I agree that there is a lot of elements of discretion. I think maybe that's a place where opportunity could be found for a better relationship with the public. I know from my own talking to people and stuff that generally most of the officers don't live within the LA area, that police within the LA area. And I was thinking about this Costco guy and what was going on with that whole incident. And I was just thinking that it kind of seems like one might want to have it both ways as far as the issue of community. If you're going to be living outside of LA and policing in LA, I would think that you would exercise your police powers in LA and not when you're outside of LA, like this guy who's off duty or whatever. But personally, it seems like there is a disconnect as far as people living in other areas and not really having a sensitivity to the neighborhoods they're in, perhaps to the extent that they could. Maybe I would call that like an issue of empathy. That's something that could be brought out more, empathy as far as how people interact and that they have empathy for others. Those were some thoughts.
Mr.
you.
Herman, please.
Such disgrace in America. See, I don't need my notes. Fuck the notes. Let's talk about the people's business. Who is the legislative body in your public meetings? And why do you violate their civil rights under 42 U.S.C. 121.31? Discrimination. Why do you assume that a person who has a mental health disability does not have the ability to stand before you and question your authority? Are you that better than them? Eric Garcetti believes he's better than them. That's why the dumb fuck has all these people living in the street in a homeless crisis. Some are non-disabled. Some are professionals sleeping in their cars because they can't pay the $3,000 rent. Others are just simply out there for recreation and decide to be homeless. Kudos to them. But as far as I can see, this commission needs to have Steve Soborov step down. The conflict of interest is we have a billionaire developer sitting on this commission, sticking his nose up our ass, trying to dig into our trash. Rather, he should just pay for his dog license like any other human being should. Woo, woo! But apparently he believes he's protected by Michael Moore and that of the Inspector General, in which I requested, for the record, the Department of Justice come and investigate criminal allegations against the LAPD. Consider the allegations brought by Baltimore Police Department engaging in corruption, bribery, excessive force, and intimidation. For the record, 42 U.S.C. 1983, fuck you, T-Fang.
Tarek DeRay McFadden Sr., followed by William and Jennifer Young, and Kevin Litwin.
Good evening, everybody. I'm here to say that I know that we are trying to go somewhere positive in life, and that is the main important thing. 25 years ago, it was different. Now to see that LAPD is trying to be on the right track, that's good enough for me. Been in Oakland, it's a little different, you know, and even in Vegas. So having one foot in is better than having no foot in. So my thing is, I understand mental health and I understand the homelessness, and people are scared of the police, not just because of the guns, it's just because they feel that they don't have leverage. I just feel that we can work on the social skills and just let people know that we're here to help them instead of scare them. And not everybody is scared of the police. They just want to feel like they're entitled, respect, and I just think that we're going in the right path by trying to implement positive ideas. So thank you. That's it.
Thank you.
William and Jennifer Young, please.
Good morning, Your Majesties, all up there. And it's been so hard for us to find this chance, Mr. Moore, to see you. And I want, because time is too short, make it very short. And what we are going to bring to your attention is the commercial crime. And we wonder if LAPD commercial crime section is working on the criminal crime or not. To make it short, January 2016, we paid $90,000 to a broker near Los Angeles airport for a Mercedes SUV. This broker had a conspiracy with Van Nuys Keys Mercedes dealership. The dealership sold the car to him, to the broker sold the car to us. Ever since, we had that Mercedes in our hand from January 2016 to May 2017 in our warehouse. But one day on May 26, 2017, Mercedes Van Nuys made a police report in Van Nuys station and saying that Mercedes was stolen from his dealership. Actually, it was in our warehouse for such long. And for this fraudulent report, we tried to report to Van Nuys station and to a commercial station for a commercial crime for 2 years and 3 years and more. And we wonder, he said he has a personal relation with the police officers. Obviously, it is. That's why this fraudulent report, there is no report taken by anybody so far. And we wonder if there is a justice or there is anything else. We can talk to you, Mr. Moore, after this meeting.
Okay, sir, ma'am, if you would meet with Lieutenant Brian Raffish, he'll raise his hand right there. We'll get your name and information, and what we'll do is I'll conduct a separate investigation into the facts and circumstances you've described, and we will, if you'll give us your point of contact, we'll reach back out to you with what we find.
We do believe, Mr. Moore, you will work on this. That's why we've been looking for you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Kevin Litwin, followed by Yvonne Michelle Autry. And we have one more card, Lucas Martin.
Good morning. I'm Commissioner Kevin Litwin with California State Parks with the Off-Highway Motor Vehicle Recreation. Commissioner Figueroa, I think we met before over in Senator Kevin De Leon's office. Good to see you again. I just wanted to come by. I was roaming around outside, and I figured I'd stop in and thank the Los Angeles Police Department for your involvement with our program, NIPM. I don't know, Chief, if you made it out to Hungry Valley the other day, you missed it. Okay, well, your department's extremely valuable. NIPM, for those that don't know, is National Youth Project involving mini bikes. And we go in and we get the kids from the inner city and take them out and get them out in the park, and it's just a great program, and teach them how to ride mini bikes, which is, I wish I had that when I was a kid. So that I just want to stop by and thank the police department, LAPD, for your involvement in that.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Yvonne Michelle Autry, followed by Lucas Martin.
Yes, again, last week I said nothing that was off topic. I'm a Christian. I stand openly against homosexuality, transsexuality, same-sex marriages, bisexuality, bestiality, necrophilia, and all sexual deviance. I am hetero. I was exposing the fact that black people and people in servitude to the powers that be are still bred. The Birch Society, they're breeding societies. I'm privy to this information because I'm just awakened to these experiments, not just perpetrated against inmates, but against homeless individuals, single-dwelling black women like myself. And so I think that's why I hit a nerve, because I spoke openly against that. And for some reason, homosexuality and the sexual, I call omnisexuality, has become synonymous not only with the mainstream lifestyle, but with Jewish privilege, because per Talmud, they think that they have a right to be pedophiles and homosexuals. Well, they are Jews in name only, but synagogues of Satan. In 1996, I was falsely accused of exposition, exposing myself to a white female. That never happened. I have never been homosexual. I was placed in Augustus Hawkins Mental Hospital for 7 days for something I never did. I never flashed her. I never exhibited myself. That fueled, this has been 23 years now, of SARs per facial recognition. Yeah, I'm black. I'm still fair, but I got hips and lips that offend some of you people. and again, on this record, that never happened. And per facial recognition and predictive policing, which is false. It is a false anachronism. It's a false mechanism to categorize people, to justify your targeting, your surveillance, and your character assassination. Per white supremacy, not just that, but per this New World Order. Okay, so that's on the record. So you couldn't make me leave today.
Lucas Martin.
Hello. I'm going to reference specifically the chief's report. You referenced earlier about harm reduction. I was wondering if a topic may be worth bringing up at these things is the rooting out of police gangs, because this is something I think we should all be aware of. It's not a conspiracy theory. I've met with officers who have reformed. One specifically, he's shown me the tattoo of a small triangle on the inside of his arm, and it's an indication that these people are rewarding each other for mistreating the public. And I think if we're talking about harm reduction, that's a topic that we need to talk about. De-escalation, this would help. You go out in the public, you want people who aren't going to harm the public. If you want to enhance public trust, I think it would be important to get rid of some people. It would mean a lot to us, and these are easily identifiable people. They put tattoos to show themselves, to mark themselves to each other. So you can find those. I just think that's important.
Sir, if you have any specific information, I'd encourage you to contact the Office of Inspector General or my office, and we'll initiate an investigation.
Okay, we have no other comment cards, Madam Commissioner.
Motion to adjourn.
A second.
All in favor? Aye. Now we gotta go to a grid meeting.
Welcome to the beautiful